I mean, I don't think I own these tenets of QBO, but I always try to have a slide on them. You know, the main things for me: no transferring of data files, aka desktop, because you're just in their books file from QBOA in the client file. Better collaboration with them and with the team. Automating data entry, we will be looking at that today, because again, that's something in the client file. You can automate everything from invoicing to sending of sales receipts, and even invoicing against unbilled activity. All that can be automated within QBO. And then mobility. I won't be showing the phone app, but of course there's a QuickBooks app on the phone. You can take pictures of receipts. It creates expenses in QuickBooks Online file. I mean, all that just makes it better, right? Mobility, if you will. And so those are my main tenets there. And hopefully you guys can see these, changes with the vision, the current state of supporting kind of desktop installed programs and working with your clients versus what we hope to be the future state. And you can find out more about this on firmofthefuture.com. A lot of firms are using the Your Books file in QBOA, that free file we give you, and they're setting up, like an example, recurring sales receipts, because it's free ACH payments for your clients to pay you, and it's just auto debits their account monthly. I mean, there's stuff like that, so you can get away from invoicing, just as one example. So automation of data entry key, better collaboration, and then so that you can spend more time looking at, advisory services as opposed to compliance. Not that that's going to totally go away. Just some interesting things there to consider what we're hoping with the move from desktop to QBO. Now, everybody here that comes today, I'm assuming you've already been to the first accountant best practices where we spend time in QBOA, the work module, Slack, and some navigation and stuff. So you'll see that. I'll go over some navigation tips and tricks. The agenda slide's coming up. We just have like 2 more slides, but assuming that you already have some clients, and so we're just going to be in a client file for the whole time, right? Once these last 2 slides are done. I would argue in this QBO lineup you're looking at right now, most of them are on plus, because you got class tracking, right? 2-sided items. You can start working with budgets, some better reporting. You might have some clients on essentials, right? But there is an advanced level now above plus, and you probably heard about that. Well, I'll be going through usage limits because you need to know. Some of your clients might even be in an experienced trial of advanced, which they are auto downgraded if they don't choose the upgrade. So we have some usage limits around chart of accounts, classes, and users, and we'll go over that soon. But QBO Advanced, it really is plus with some extra features right now, and we're going to build more and more in. Right? But we have a third-party reporting app that's built in there, but for Fathom, for KPI indexing and reporting and advisory services like that. Batch import, batch creation of invoices, at least for now, that's what it is. Better user security. So those are the 4 QBO SKUs right now. And of course, there's also QuickBooks Self-Employed, which is also online. I just don't consider it part of QBO. There's no way to upgrade or downgrade. But that's for your self-employed clients that really wouldn't need transactions or real financial reporting. It's just a bank feed and choosing between personal and business. It's a Schedule C categories, right? But you could still manage a self-employed client in QBOA. QuickBooks Online Accountant is what you are all using, right, to manage and access your clients. Okay, so email me if you want this deck. I think I did add a few slides, but this it's just a good alignment on the lineup. Now here, we're going to dive into product now. Here's the agenda. I'm going to go over the accountant tools, so I'm already in a client file. All right, I won't be spending any time in QBOA, but feel free to ask questions around QBOA if you want. We're going to go through the overview tab, report tools, batch classify, right, that tool that you might be used to in QuickBooks Accountant Edition. Working with your Pro Premier clients, we have that tool in QBO when you're in through QBOA. The audit log report, close date, password, some key settings to consider around sales and expense and automation, just so you know they're there. Starting in May, we're going to have this Beyond the Basics session, which will be a deep dive of product and service businesses, about an hour and 15 minutes long as well. And then we'll dive into like more of these settings and, project costing, inventory, item tracking, things like that. So that will not really be part of today. However, I am going to show the results of some of these settings. What do they mean? Just to make sure we're aligned. We'll go over updated user roles and the usage limits. You need to know that. It's part of in the client file. I'm adding it. Reporting, saving customizations, just a few things I thought were important. I mean, you do more reporting than I do. You do more bank recs than I do, but still there's some things to consider around reporting bank recs, chart of accounts, merging, detail type. We just need to cover that just to make sure we're on the same page and you know what to expect. Recurring transactions, bank feeds, and that kind of automation. Now, the two mistakes I usually pick on are, well, merging files or duplicate accounts, merging chart of accounts, excuse me. Overstated AR, I got an example of that we'll look at the end, and then opening balance equity, how to avoid that, right? So we'll look at some of those things, the low-hanging fruit of mistakes. We'll also talk about the drawer. Let me write that down so I don't remember. It'll come up, we'll see it. But there's a drawer phenomena within QBO where you're on an invoice or you're on a check and a panel kicks out on the right, you know, to show you that you have like open bills or unbilled time expense material to put on the invoice. All that's important and to train your client on. If there's other topics you want to cover, please put it in the questions box and I can stay a little later. I have something at 11:30 Pacific, so up to then I can stay and I'll just eat later. So anyway, again, the PDF version is just these slides kind of going through and overcoming mistakes and different things. I won't be really following this, but just so you know. All right, feel free to download it or email me if there's an issue. Okay, like I said, I'm in a client file from QBOA, right? I have accountant up here. I can quickly go back to QBOA. I have the toolbox, right? And this is where we are going to eventually get to, because if you're used to QuickBooks Accountant Edition using Premier, working with your Pro Premier clients, right? You have an accountant menu. So thematically, it's similar. You get this toolbox, and those are your accountant tools. It's not the same number of tools you're used to if you're a QBA user, but it should be at least familiar. But we'll look at a few of these tools, right? And of course, when you're in from QBOA, you can go in and out of other client files. The little hamburger icon just gives you a few inches on the left, right? And I'll go over some other navigation things like top icon bar as I'm going. I'll have several windows open in the same file, so how do you do that and things like that. Before I go into the overview tab, which we don't land on, I'm hoping we land on soon, because your clients don't see the overview tab. Right? They come into the dashboard, they don't have any of this stuff up top, just the file name. But the overview tab is for you. We're going to go there next, then we'll go to the toolbox. But I wanted to mention the candy stripe bar, which your clients would have too, search field, plus sign, gear icon, right? Left clicking in the search field, that will always show you the last 10 transactions, added, edited, or modified in the file. Added or modified in the file. Right? And any report. And you can go look at a report from there. And you can just start typing. Or an amount. If it's an amount, you need a dollar sign. If it's just an invoice number, just put in a number, it'll pull up the invoice. Right? So the search field's really helpful. And then you can get to an advanced search from there. Plus sign, of course, we already know. Quick way to get to all the transactions or the forms. And then the gear icon, which we will come in here a couple times, this is your operational settings. Lists, settings, users, you know, reconcile budget, attachments, things like that, right? Recurring transactions would be here. So really the left-hand panel, plus sign and gear icon. That's it. If it's not in there, it's probably not turned on, but that's what today's about. You know, once we get through the overview tab and accountant tools, we got to go through the key settings. Like some of you might not know that you can do project tracking in QBO, you know, even tracking labor burden now, right? So things like that. The overview tab. Eventually you will land here. And these boxes will be open. I close them before the webinars just so we can start there and open it up. But there's 4 sections of the overview tab. You still come into the dashboard, but just don't forget that the overview tab is there in the left-hand panel. Company setup info. This shows the subscription level, though you can see that in QBOA, right? When you hover over the QB icon and in the status column and the client list. It'll show if they have payroll or not, if sales tax is active or not, and all of the third-party apps. It's nice about, obviously this is my main test file. I have tons of third parties. I'm not saying your client would have this many, but anyway, when you're in a client file from QBOA, you don't see the apps tab, third-party apps, right? Like your client would. But so it's just nice to have that kind of visibility. I mean, I can see that in QBOA too, especially from the master admin in QBOA. So some company setup info, banking activity, and this would be, you know, all the asset accounts, I guess, banking accounts, if you will, the balance in QuickBooks. Transactions that are not yet accepted, we'll be looking at bank feeds a little bit. What's not reconciled, and then what I'm reconciled through. Right? So things to consider around banking in your asset and liability accounts. Common issues. How many transactions are uncleared and undeposited funds? Now, these just bring you to registers, but still, you can do some troubleshooting from there. Do I have any uncategorized assets? Yeah, I got 13 transactions that are set to uncategorized. What about uncategorized income or expense? A lot of that times, this happens with the bank feed. Opening balance equity, we always want this to be zero. And I'll be going through like what makes opening balance equity get hit, because you wouldn't think of it as a GAAP compliant account. It's not. You wouldn't really see it. You'll see it on a balance sheet, but you wouldn't want it to go to a return. So you always want this to be zero, but for an example, when someone adds a new customer and they put in an open balance, it debits AR, but it credits, yeah, opening balance equity. So there's some, or someone adds a new bank and they create a new balance, right? Instead of doing a journal entry or a deposit, right? It'll hit OBE. And that's just how it's designed. So we want that to be zero, but at least lets me know, right? And I can click on any of these amounts that we're surfacing up. If there's issues in the file, these are some of the red flags we know. They happen in desktop too. They happen in QBO. And we're going to bring you to a register to see where it's from. And you guys, I have a negative 26, 620, 68. And so I can use register to troubleshoot. I have 15 negative asset and liability accounts, right? Go back to undeposited funds, click on that. Again, we're just going to surface up low-hanging fruit of mistakes. They'll go to the register to make the deposit as opposed to receiving the payment against the invoice, that kind of stuff. So I'm talking about. Okay. Some of you, just to, as we go through and I see other things, I feel it pertinent to know or to consider. I'm going to point them out. But I'll try to do it slowly so that we're all going with the same pace. The register, when you come in here, a lot of you will access a client file. There's these little gear icons on lists, reports, and particularly the register, because that's a list. And when you click on the little gear, not the big gear, right? That's for larger stuff, operational settings. We've already gone over that. But the little gear icon, right? There's columns you can turn on or off. You'll remember the next time. Usually, most QBO files and clients, they won't know about this paper ledger mode, particularly if you're used to desktop. So typically, the register opens up default up top. Now, I'm not saying we or even you would encourage your clients to enter transactions in the register. They might, this and that, but for better reporting, use an invoice, a sales receipt, a bill, a check, you know? I guess I could see a deposit here, but a lot of times that will then duplicate income. We don't really want to use these transactions here. Use the forms under the plus sign or in the different sales or expense areas in QBO. We're used to, in desktop at least, especially if you're a QuickBooks desktop user, the register opens up at the bottom and it's in chronological order. Well, the default setting in QBO is it's going to be up top and not really in chronological order. So the little gear icon is a tip. Paper ledger mode. This would be the same place you'd go to show one line as opposed to two, right? So I do encourage you to at least put it in a paper ledger mode because that's what you're used to. That makes it more like a typical register I have seen over the years in Quicken, QuickBooks Desktop, whatever, and particularly QBO. So again, I don't want them entering transactions here, but you work with your clients. You know what works best for them, what have you. The nice thing about QuickBooks Online, if I have class tracking turned on, I can actually tag a class in the register. So it's interesting. Anyway, maybe neither here nor there, but I wanted to mention that piece. When you come in from the overview, it's going to bring you to a register. Yes, I would rather go to a report than the register, so I'd push that feedback up. But common issues. And then finally in the overview tab, transaction volume. Now this might be helpful. Not a lot going on here with Clay and his file over the last 30 days, but you can look at 30 days, 60, 90, or the last year. You know, what's the transaction volume? This would give you a good idea of, is everything in there? How's business going? That kind of stuff. So I'm sure we'll add more and more stuff to the overview tab. I'd love to see charts and graphs and things like that. But Anyway, 4 things now in the Overview tab. It's only Accountant View, or it's in QuickBooks Online Advanced. And consider that, okay? Now, let's go to Accountant Tools. Back in the dashboard, where most of us are going to land when you come into the file. Briefcase, reclassify transactions, okay? First, though, before I go in here, remember that, coming back, 1 second. Report tools. I'm going to show like 3 tools in here that I think matter. The rest, up to you as far as priority of importance. But these tools, these 3 tools I'm going to show you I think matter for anybody. Report tools, while it's really about this top line. This used to be the old accountant home for QBOA, way back in the day. We still keep it here because of this default. So I could look at, and this would still be pertinent, last year and maybe like cash basis. Okay, the company financial summary reports and the classified transaction tool and a couple others will reflect this default date range. Now, this isn't going to roll out to all your clients, in QBOA. It's really just going to impact this one. But this report tools feature is going to be in the toolbox when you're in all your client files. So when I go to a P&L or balance sheet, which I'm going to do now, it should reflect this. So let's test that out. I want to keep this page open. I'm going to right-click the tab I'm on and duplicate. This is how you get a second window open in the same file. You can't just click the browser plus sign, right? You got to right-click, duplicate, right? It gives you another page. It even works with transactions, right? Right-click, open a new tab. Right, so do that a lot. I like Google Chrome. Firefox works well. I try to avoid Internet Explorer unless I'm converting back to QuickBooks Desktop. That's the only way. Sometimes it might not work out. Client wants to go back to Pro 18 or whatever. Use IE 11. That's the only time I use IE for QBO at all. It's going back. So reports, and then let's do balance sheet. And this should open to last year cash basis. Right click duplicate and do a P&L. There's some other account I want to make you aware of that you probably already know. Profit and loss. Now, favorites. Let's just quickly touch on reporting. Because it's a north-south scroll, right, top to bottom, I don't know. For me, that gets a little weary. So I just favorite, I star all the reports that I will run in this file. And again, this is one of the things I wish that would carry over to other files, but it's just not really we're just not to that level yet. That will be awesome one day. You have to choose in each file, which ones are important. But they're probably different for each client. But for me, I star all the reports so they're up top so I don't have to scroll and pick them. And all you're doing is just, starring them, right? Just moves them up top. And then I usually close the sub buckets. That's just me. You do it your way. I just don't like scrolling. So there are several different profit and loss reports, right? I'm just going to do the canned one. And again, it'll open. And yes, your report will jump down to the top of the report and away from the header. Also wish it didn't do that. Anytime you make a change, don't be surprised. It'll go boop, right? So you've seen it. Just you're not doing anything wrong. Just how it's designed currently. A P&L, and look, it opened up to last year in cash basis, right? So, though I can't really tell you how you'll fix it. Again, I don't really fix things, but I just don't. I don't have any live clients, and I don't have enough practice in that. Maybe one day. But I just want to show you stuff that you'll find odd and things to look out for in the file as we're going through. Unapplied cash payment income. Well, what is that? It's not really an account you'd want to see on a return. It's not a field anywhere on a tax return. And typically on a report, GAAP compliance report you're giving to the bank, for whatever reason, you wouldn't include that on there. This is quite a bit. I'm going to drill down. Unapplied cash payment income on a cash basis P&L, we actually have to put this account on there for balancing purposes, because again, double entry accounting system, debits, credits, things like that. Because I must have an invoice that's dated beyond the payment. Usually that's what happens. I have a bunch of payments or credits memos that haven't been applied. Okay, and on a cash basis, we put it on unapplied cash payment income. You'll also see it on the expense side. I doubt I have any examples. I might. Yeah, unapplied cash bill payment expense. I got some bill payments I've made that are not applied to bills. or vendor credits. That's where they would show up. And usually it's a date range thing. So just be aware of those, and you're going to want to drill down on them. However, and we'll tie this last navigation tip off, before I drill down, I don't want to lose my report, because I might have, done previous year and then maybe a dollar change or something like that and run the report. So I'll have my columns, applied cash payment income. Pretty bad this year, at least it was even worse last year, but at least positive. Anyway, so that's something to consider. Before I drill down to see the culprit, I'm going to right-click duplicate, right? So I have the summary report open because I might have customized it how I want. Now I can drill down to the transaction detail account. And then I would scroll through to look through and see what the main culprits is to make it 151,000. Right? And from there, I would probably go into the receive payment window and apply all this these negative AR I have against the positive AR that will make this go away. Typically what I would do. You might have another way, et cetera, what you're looking for. I always consider you guys will see reports way differently than I do, right? And in a better way to track trends because you're accountants and CPAs and you've been to school and have tons more experience in a live scenario. Just remember, open Windows, duplicate the tab before you go down to the detail, and watch out for the unapplied cash payment income and the unapplied bill payment expense. There's a reason for that. It's not a bug. On a cash basis P&L, we're going to put it there. We have to, just to make sure it's balancing in the background. Okay. So let's say I have this report the way I want it. Now we're going to quickly do reporting, then we'll go into the other tools. Remember to save your customizations. Right? This is like memorizing a report if you're used to that in desktop. You can add it to a group. I have a group for auto-send because you can auto-send reports and sales receipts and invoices out of QBO. We'll go over that later when we look at recurring transactions and automating data entry. However, when you're customizing, you can add it to a group or not. I'll just show you visually what it means. The other part that matters is the sharing with everybody that would have the ability to see a P&L. And we'll go over users in a bit. Basically the all user, company admin or master admin, or anybody from QBOA, right? You're basically a company admin when you're in the client file. I cannot restrict a staff member who's part of my QBOA from something within the file if they have access to that client. Firm only would just be for everybody that's in QBOA, right? That comes into this file, I can create it for them. So I'm not going to share it with anybody, and I'll just add it to a group and I'll save. Just because I want to make sure in the reports list, there's three main buckets. There are all the reports. We'll go ahead and close out of here. Custom reports, that's basically your report list. Reports that you've saved customizations. The nice thing about saving it to a group, you don't have to. I have a lot of these reports up here that are just kind of on their own. I just don't want to reinvent them every time. I just run them. There's a check register report year to date I created a while ago, so I can just run that. And I can't share these with other files yet, but I can share them with other people, right? And they'll say they're shared if they are. The auto send, if you click on the group itself, you can schedule groups to be sent. They're not encrypted. I think QuickBooks Desktop got this ability in 2017. QBO's had it ever since I've been in QBO since 2009, but they're not encrypted or anything, right? So they're basically a PDF attachment, but you can send them out of your email to people that don't actually access the file for whatever reason. Okay, so that's kind of reporting. We'll come back later on for bank rec discrepancy and some things around there when we get to reconcile. But, auto send, how to customize. One other thing that comes up, and then we'll move on to batch classified transactions. See, debit credit, right? You're probably used to like amount balance. Just know that you can change that, though it doesn't change it forever. Like I wish these columns were sticky. They're not. You have to actually save the report. But when you click the little gear icon, remember, it's the little settings icon and all these lists and reports. You're going to see it all the time, and they'll have different options depending on where you are, right, respective to the window you're on. But still, it's important to know that's there because there might be other columns you really want to see, but you just don't think they're there, and it'll be frustrating for you. So make sure you click on the little settings gear icon on any list or report. Particularly on the detail reports, there's a lot there. Now, I know we often default to amount and balance, right, for a detailed report. You're drilling down on a P&L, and it's just going to show amount balance. Well, here's where you would check off debit and credit, right? And you can uncheck amount and balance, and then you would just have the debits and the credits. Okay, so anyway, when I click Save Customization, I click Save. Yeah, I just saved over a report. There you go. That's pretty much it in reports. I won't go much into management reports, but they are report packages. So you can build a package with table of contents, firm logo, pre and post notes, and the reports themselves. Right. So there's that. Some consider that or leverage that, probably not now, but definitely from November through, the end of the year and into January for the reports that require the SARS-21 info at the bottom. Management reports is the workaround to allow that to happen. So if you have any questions about that, email me, let me know. But I usually field those in November and December. So standard reports, custom reports, reporting. Okay, you are limited when you're in the client file. If client has Simple Start, it's not like you're going to see all these other reports that would be in Plus. Okay, you're limited by the QBO level of your client. So Simple Start has like 20 plus reports. Essentials is 40 plus, 40 to 60-ish, if you will. And then Plus has like 108 or something like that, last count. I know we've added more. Okay, we'll come back to reporting. There have been some new reports, particularly around payroll and things that make it a little easier with summary payroll and by employee. So look for those. However, and we're going to do more and more with reporting this year from a development standpoint, which is exciting. Now, Accountant Toolbox. Batch or classify. Still got to be the most oft used tool working with the client files, whether it's desktop or QBO. Because clients will always write transactions to the wrong account. And so this feature, which you might already be aware of in desktop, allows you to reclassify miscoded transactions in a batch. Now it defaults to cash basis and last year, right? Because that's my report tool default, remember? So this carries over to this one. Now I don't want you leaving here thinking that that report tool feature carries over to every reporting tool. It does not. It's really just company financial reports and this tool, and probably a couple others. I can't remember. I don't really keep track, but you'll know it. If you were to go to some detail report, usually most reports open to last month, right? Or this month to date or something. Yeah, like the GL, it always opens till like last month or something, for example. But if they wrote the wrong account for meals, like why would I have customer invoice? Anyway, we won't even talk about that part. But Costco, that's ridiculous. And by the way, this is the last window that we're quote unquote looks like old classic QBO. The last one we're going to fix, and we are. And I know like the box to the line is off. If you've ran into that, and if it's more than 30 transactions in an account, you can't select them all. Those kind of things. We're rectifying those, right? Because it's still a very oft-used tool. But this just allows me, at base value, to choose a different account, right? That's all. Just allows me to choose a different account. So there's that. The other reason that people use the batch classify tool is the fact that invoice thing's really annoying me. I need to talk to them about that. The fact that they use this to bird's eye the account and what transaction types, which is a click sortable column, by the way, are in the account. And you can do this with balance sheet accounts as well. Like I can look at barter and see if there's anything in there for last year on accrual basis, just to see. Right? Or prepaids. I just want to see journal entries, right? That's all we'd want to see. Though there are reports to look at that, right? And you can drill down on a balance sheet on an account, or you can drill down on a P&L account, and you can see all the transactional detail, and that's fine. But you can also just go here, drill on the account, and you'll see all the transactions in there for the last year, or this year, or last quarter, last month, and see what type they are. Are they using the correct type you taught me? So I see two reasons for batch classify. Clearly, the main reason it's there to batch classify miscoded transactions. The second is to bird's eye accounts and make sure Woody is using the correct transaction forms for each account that we've gone over several times to keep it consistent, because that just means that file's that much healthier. I mean, we get like one of the tenets I don't discuss. We get it. There's another main tenet of QBO that's helpful for you all that I hear from tax professionals that also do accounting that were heavy desktop QuickBooks users, and they moved over the last few years to QBO and then like our online tax software, or they still go to Lacert or ProSeries, but still. The main theme that they respond to me in these surveys I do with them is that they prefer QBO at the end of the year in tax time because the file has better propensity of being healthy, because you are the actual professionals in the client file at least monthly or even quarterly. Where in desktop, I might be seeing that file like once for the first time in the last 12 months. Well, that's going to be jacked up. That much I know. So QBO, at least I can go in and keep track of the bank feeds and make sure Woody's categorizing it correctly with these tools. So when it comes to December, January, February, is less cleanup in QuickBooks. It's kind of a hard tenet to just put on a bullet point. And to me, it seems obvious, but still, I have to mention it. Anyway, enough about that. Voided deleted transaction. I don't even know if I have any. I think this only looks at the last month, though. This is a huge report. It's built off of the audit log, which you'll find under the gear icon, by the way. And let's clear, yeah, so I don't have anything voided or deleted. But this would show anything voided or deleted and give you the history. I like the audit log just because it shows, what are the people doing when they log into the file and then they log out. With desktop, there's an audit trail. That's great, but I can't really see when people log in and out and what they're doing. I just see what they're doing. This is helpful for like if someone logs in, creates a check, prints it, and then deletes it. I mean, that'd be like worst case scenario, but I would be able to see that with the audit log in QBO. Like I say, you get here from the gear icon, audit log, or from reports. And I think it's also like, well, I mean, you go to voided deleted, you clear the filter, and then you're, on the audit log report. So there's that too. But it's mostly just me in here. Oh, by the way, system administrator, that's either a recurring transaction, auto-entered. That could be a bank feed, or it could be a third-party app. So if you see a bunch of system admin, you're like, what is going on? If they're actually transactions, then they probably have some recurring transactions set up. You might know it as memorized transactions in desktop. It's the same thing over here. We just call it recurring. And then a lot of times when the feed comes in, that'll be quote-unquote system admin. But it's basically me and Clay. And then Leah comes in here a lot, right? So I can see what she's doing. Now, interestingly enough, I can see Leah's part of my QBA. So you will see the name of the staff. The client only sees the firm name in the audit log. They might not know who Leah is. I don't know if you knew that. That helps. So they're not calling you frantically, hey, there's this person, Leah Hartman, in my file, right? Because they only know Woody or Valerie or Ray or whatever. Anyway, so audit log and, of course, voided deleted transactions, right? That's a big one. So I can look at users. I can look at just transactions that were voided and deleted. Right? Who signed in and out. You can look at time events. I think that one's kind of cool. And we'll look at this month. Let's look at let's look at this year so far. Anything voided, deleted. Yeah, all right, so some. Leah deleted a tax payment. Good to know. I can't recreate it from here, but I could view the history. It was created. It hasn't been cleared yet, which is good. And then 11 minutes later, it's deleted. Okay, so must have been a bad tax payment or something. I don't know. I could ask her about it. Anyway, all these things are really helpful for visibility. But just know that your client, they see the firm name. I, being a part of QBOA, and you can see each of our names, right? Because we're part of the QBOA team. Another thing to consider, and this will lead us a good segue into settings. Takes you to the advanced tab. Now I know settings. Let me just duplicate the tab just so we're aligned here. We'll get into user roles and usage limits soon, and then some of the other stuff. This gear icon, right? Account and settings, that's where we are. Think of it as edit preferences for those of you who use QuickBooks Account Edition or have clients on Pro. Closed book, I don't have one on here, and I have friends that don't even put one on. They're actual professionals that do accounting and tax because they're in the client's file so much that they just don't feel the need for a close date. However, it all depends on your gig you have with the client. or the engagement letter, or what you agreed to do. I just love the fact that QBO, I can go in when there's an issue, or I get an email or a text or something like that. Right? I touch it way more than, say, a desktop file. But a closing date is just like that. Let's say I did the cleanup for, using some of these tools, I did the cleanup for, last year. Right? And you put in a closing date and password. Now, any company admin or master admin, aka my client, can undo this by just uncheck and close the books, but they might not even know where it is because it's kind of buried in the advanced setting. An admin could find it and turn it off. So there's that. It's not like quote unquote locked in, but we know that QBO, just like desktop, it doesn't actually quote unquote close a period. It's not a true close. It's really just a pop-up. As I'm trying to void or something, or your client's trying to void or delete something, if it impacts something in a bad way, it's going to, if they try to do anything to it when they hit save and close, it's going to pop open a field enter a password. And the goal there is just that it prompts them to contact you, so that you can catch it before it becomes, a mistake for you, or compromise the tax return that you had just e-filed, right? So the prior period. So close book's definitely important. And when you turn that on, there's a closing date exception report. It's an accountant report, right? In the accountant report section, you'll see it. So you can see anything that impacts before the close date. So I think that's important to consider. We went over closed books, right? You got that. This accounting method, this does impact a couple tools, particularly if you have the new automated sales tax feature on, or your client does, I should say. If you change it to cash, that automating sales tax now supports that. Outside of this, and I think the prep for taxes tool, this accounting method setting doesn't do anything. If I just leave it at accrual, because I've always felt, after years and years of working with just QuickBooks in general, desktop or QBO, while I can toggle the basis on a report, on a given report, as you saw with the P&L example we had earlier and stuff, QuickBooks really leans towards accrual, you probably would guess, and have learned yourself. Not that really matters, because if it's cash basis business, I'm using checks, credit card expenses, and sales receipts. If there's some accrual, then I'm using customer invoices and vendor bills. And then I'm toggling, the basis on a report. Other than that, I really don't care. I mean, you probably have more in the dog in that fight than I do. I just want you to know that this setting is not really do anything outside of just what I shared. Tax form, that's there. Chart of accounts, yeah, turn on numbers. Know that the chart of accounts, though, the order of it, it's going to be either alphabetical within each type or numeric within each type if numbers are turned on. There's no way to change the order of the chart of accounts outside of those two things. Now that impacts the order of your report, right? Because reports inherit, the account order on reports inherits the order of the chart of accounts, just like in desktop. So it's just limitation in QBO. We're in the client file. I need to point that out. My webinars are not all like sunshine. You got to make sure that you know, because for me, it's more important that you don't get stuck when you're talking with a client or after the fact, after you've told them that QBO does this, this, and this, and 3 months later you have a bad experience, right? It's more important that you don't have that, because you can support both platforms. But from my take, I want to make sure that you're prepared for what might you not know could be limitations within QBO. As we expand on it, still, limitation of the chart of accounts order. Let me just go to the chart of accounts. And I get here under accounting chart of accounts, or you could do the gear icon list chart of accounts, right? Either way. I mean, you guys do it how you do it. You're first seeing a limit. Sorry, I'm usage limits, right? I have 258 accounts, so I'm already over it. There is a usage limit. So if I add any more accounts, I'd have to move up to QBO Advanced. And hopefully I can show a couple other examples of usage limits, but we're starting to talk about that a little bit just in this webinar now. But notice, the order is numeric within each type, okay? There's no diamond. I can't move it around or anything. If I turn numbers off, then it would be alphabetical within each type. And that's going to carry over to reporting, okay? That's what I'm talking about here. Class, yes, class and location tracking. You might use both. You might only use one. What's important to consider about class and location tracking, and usually it's typical to have a class per line item, and a location is just one per transaction. This came up yesterday with a firm. So be aware of this. Let's just go to a bill. Oh dear, there we go. Bill. You want to do class tracking, right? You want a profit and loss by department or profit center or whatever. Just know, and let me go, by the way, the little clock, this gives you the last 10 bills. So when you're on a form, it's blank, and you're like, oh yeah, what was that bill I did last week? Just click the little clock. All right, I guarantee it's in there. Anyway, let's go to this Bake Accounting one. If I have 2 lines, let's do another one too. This was telephone support, whatever. No. Yeah, telephone expense, $100. I'm not going to tag it to a project. We'll get to here. Making things billable, passing through an invoice, project profitability, right? Tagging a customer to expense, so you see it on P&L, right? I'll show you where you turn that on. It'll be a deeper dive into Beyond the Basic webinar series, but still, just so you know, it exists. It exists. And by the way, side note, since 67% of you service-based? Something like that, 2/3 anyway, we'll call it. Assuming they're using items to track things, really for project tracking, profitability by project or the work they're doing, people buying things and reselling them or just tracking the cost of the work, so you're using items to track that, service items, things like that. Even if it's not inventory or whatever. QBO Plus or QBO Advanced is really the level your client needs to be at. They need to at least be at Plus. And Plus is where class tracking happens, right? So even if you're not doing job costing, or you don't need 2-sided items, which is Plus and above. Essentials only has single-sided items. That's important. You want an item to hit COGS and revenue, right? Use the same item. So you can use it on a bill, as I could use it or whatever. The fact of me tagging categories, sure, but what about tagging items, right? That's Plus and above, not essentials. I just want to point that out too. Most of your clients are probably on Plus. Anyway, class tracking. This could be a different class, right? Now, the whole $350 is going to go to this location Texas on the P&L or the balance sheet, because I can do balance sheet by location too. For the P&L by class, $250 will be in training, $100 in conferences, right? So class is just another thing you can use for profit centers or whatever. There is no viable balance sheet by class in QBO. Just want to make sure we're aligned on that. You're meeting with a nonprofit. If that comes up, I want to make sure you don't get stuck. Okay? Down the road. P&L by class, all day long. P&L by location, all day long. We already have canned reports that are like that. But class tracking is specific to profit and loss, not going to really impact balance sheet activity. Maybe one day we'll go over the why that is. It has to be the coding and the source versus target, but that's just way too much for today. If you want to know more, there's a video on QBO best practices on reporting and source versus target and class tracking as an example. So it'll clear it up in like 8 minutes, right? And some of you might already know. I just want to make sure you knew that, and that's why I choose a bill. By the way, one last thing, and then we will go to move on to user roles, usage limits, the rest of the settings, and some transaction activity and common mistakes. On any transaction that's saved, in the More tab, down at the bottom, don't forget the More tab. There's a lot of options here. Copy, delete. Sometimes you'll see void and whatever. Transaction journal. This is your debit credit report. As you're getting used to QBO, you're working with clients and they have like this really big invoice or something, and you just want to make sure the appropriate accounts are debited as credited and it balances. Click More, Transaction Journal. This is your quote-unquote Control Y report in QBO if you're used to that in desktop. In desktop, any transaction, Control Y brings up the same report, right? Other key settings to consider. So class location, hopefully, this comes up a lot. That's why I spend so much time on it. Automation, right? You can set a global setting to invoice unbilled activity. Anywhere I tagged a job, right? We saw that on the bill. If I marked it billable or time entry or expense or whatever, every Tuesday, QBO is going to create customer invoices for any customer that has unbilled time activity. This is an automated thing. Now, let's take it one step further. And we'll go into recurring transactions quickly because we can. These all make sense to me, and hopefully this isn't confusing to you all. Let's see, Judith, I know this is a while back, but where did you go to get where you reclassed bulk transactions? Yeah. So that would be, let me do another tab because we're talking about merging accounts eventually too. Briefcase. Do you see? So if you're not seeing a briefcase, it should be right next to QB Accountant and right to the left of the client file name. If you don't see it, that means you're in as the client. Okay? It's important. None of us should not see this when they're in a client file. Okay, cool. You got it. Reclassify transaction is the second one. It's still like the old reclassify from like 2009 desktop, right? We updated in 2010 in desktop, but we are going to enhance it. But still, it's still very functional. Still very functional. Thanks for the question. All right. It's still a viable tool is what I mean. I talked about the global setting for automation. I go over this more in the Beyond the Basics, but just real quick, there are recurring transactions in QBO. Invoices, really. Where are you? Oh, okay. Well, let's just do one. I swear I had an invoice. You can do a recurring transaction for almost anything, except for receive payment, bill payment, or paycheck. And if it's a recurring receive payment, what really should that be? A sales receipt, right? Not an invoice. Okay. This is just a template I'm creating for a particular customer, whatever. But there are two options that I want you to, that's important to know. Automatically send, include unbilled activity. So if you have if you support lawyers or someone like engineers, I think architects would be great for. They're just anybody who's a service-based, right? Most of you guys are service-based. They're doing a lot of time entry. They want to invoice against that time, right? It's not like an estimate to actual. It's not like job costing, really. Just want to send it through to an invoice. If the global setting is too global because you want to pick and choose what time goes to the invoice, then create a template. This goes every month, right? And it includes any unbilled activity plus whatever I'm charging them below. So this makes it specific to a customer. So there's that too. Okay. Project tracking, yes, we'll go over that more in next month in the Beyond the Basics, but yes, you can do project profitability. Okay, even labor burden. It's in play. Time tracking is in Essentials Plus and Advanced, and you can make it billable and create invoices, right? And there's multiple currency too. And oh, by the way, quick tip, maybe the other stuff won't even matter for you, but when I'm in a client file, I always change it from 1 to 3 hours. It defaults to 1, so I do it to 3, just because I don't want to get kicked out. That's more of a pebble in the shoe, but figure you might want to know. You probably already knew. Now, sales settings, there are some key ones. Yes, you can customize forms. We'll go over that more in the Beyond the Basics. Here's where you can take an upfront deposit if you want or a discount. So far, and at least in Plus, there's 3 custom fields on sales forms. Advanced has more custom fields. Products and services, though, we're not really heavy here on that. This is where you turn on inventory. And progress invoicing is a thing in QBO. I can invoice against an estimate till it's closed. Okay, expenses, and we'll go over this more in the Beyond the Basics, but these are some of the 3 most important settings if you're doing job costing. It shows items on cost forms, so I can buy stuff and resell it or buy stuff and tag it to a customer. I can tag expenses by customer to pass it through or for a P&L buy. This would impact profitability. Without this checkbox, it ain't happening. Make expenses and items billable, meaning pass through time material expense, right? Now, and then purchase orders. I think we've seen enough with settings. The important thing, just to make we're tied off here, because with service-based businesses, you're still doing a lot of like billable time cost stuff, right? So on the sales window and the invoicing window, like you'll have unbilled activity. Like I have 48K in unbilled activity. This is where I just tagged, like I use delayed charges, which is a non-posting customer form, or I tag time or expenses to the customer and I can create invoices against it. Like for instance, Jobber. And this is maybe gives us a chance to talk about the drawer. When you have unbilled activity, meaning expense charges, mean delayed charges or time, tagged to an invoice and you check the box for billable, right? Some of you might not even know this is available in QBO. You don't need desktop for this. This is already in. This is billable time to an invoice is even in Essentials. But again, for service-based businesses, you got to be using Plus. Two-sided items, class tracking, the other stuff. The drawer will open up on customer invoices reminding your client or you about unbilled time and expense. There's even a report, uninvoiced charges, uninvoiced time that you can run. I have not yet created an invoice for my customer in this. I don't want to lose out, right? We're going to remind you. And then you can just add it to the invoice. So I could add all of this stuff there. Now this non-posting time becomes posting, debit AR, credit revenue, right? Now I can go receive a payment for it. So some issue I got here, but anyway, just remember the drawer. Before I go into user roles and limits, the other drawer piece here also impacts, or the drawer I should say impacts expenses and vendors too. So let's say for Clay I have some open bills. Now what do clients do often when they know they got to pay a vendor and they might even see the bill? They'll go do a check, right? I'm not judging them. I can't really blame them. It makes sense. Maybe they just don't remember that you just said, Woody, you got to use a bill payment. If you use a check, it's not actually going to close the payable, right? The bill's still open. You got all this AP on the balance sheet. You're writing checks. What are you doing? So if I go do this and you can train them, oops, that's the employee. Let's do the vendor. A drawer will kick open. So Judith could say, hey, if you're writing a check and all of a sudden the thing on the thing opens up on the right, that's probably a good way to explain it to me. The panel opens, you see a couple bills. Well, add them. This makes it a bill payment check. This properly debits the AP, okay? And closes the bill, as we know, and that's what we want. So the drawer is important. We're in the client file. The drawer is really important. It kicks out on customer invoices if there's unbilled, in other words, uninvoiced, I should say, delayed charges, expense, or time. Any cost, I've tagged it, right, based on those settings. We'll get more into that in the Beyond the Basic webinar. But it also impacts the expense side. Writing checks when you already have bills. Well, that's just going to duplicate the expense. So how do we prevent that, right? So teach them about the drawer phenomena. Very important. Now, I'll leave project tracking for now because we'll go over that later. But in the off chance, I think I put this in, if you guys do a lot of project tracking, there is an updated video. I know it's a little long, 14 minutes, but it's how you would, even goes over T-Sheets integration. I'll put it in there, the new project tracking, and labor burden. So you might have clients, if 2/3 of you are doing service-based, my guess is some of you have contractors or people that want to see labor burden, right? P&L buy and includes payroll expense. That was never really a thing in QBO, so now it is. So feel free to leverage that video or share it so you know how it works. This is the project tracking over here on the left I'm talking about. That's where I go in. So the profit margin, your income cost against the job, et cetera, all the transactions and estimated cost of hours against it from your employees or subcontractors. So it's real. QBO Plus is really matching QuickBooks Pro now outside of estimate to actual reporting, actually seeing the job in the paycheck, a loan manager. I'm just thinking of some things where, sales tax is a little more forgiving and so is a chart of accounts and desktop. But outside of that, QBO is really akin to QuickBooks Pro. I only make that point because if you're a firm that supports desktop customers, most of your clients are using Pro. So then QBO Plus is there too, right? Used to be a lot more of a feature gap between the two. So this definitely changes things. Okay, let's do user roles, usage limits real quick. Merging accounts, detail type. We'll look at bank feeds just for automating data. My Valerie Heckman, one of my product specialist colleagues, does a great deep dive on banking and reconciliation, so bank feeds and rec. So she has some, I think, even for this month and next month. She does like a monthly. So I would go to that. Or at QBO Best Practices, you have these group webinars already, right here. These are all the ones we're doing. I'm just combining these two. But this beyond this in the client file, we have the regular AVP you've already been to, but this bank feeds and reconcile, 51 minutes, really good. So really deep dive on that. Because bank feeds is really critical for QBO to be successful. So, and there's a lot of third-party app videos, and we're going to add more and update them. But anyway, feel free to leverage that site. Manage users. I'm going to go into a different file for this one. My particular QBO file with all the testing I do is a little on the ugly side in manage users. So this one's a little more appropriate to what you would normally see day to day. So again, in Plus, right, and even Essentials, we have, you have an admin type, a standard user, reports only, or even time only. But a standard would be all. Just know that recently we added the ability to be an all user, which is like a company admin though. So they can see all company financial reports and registers and do bank feeds, but you can turn off payroll. So they can't see the amounts of paychecks or things like that. Now that's up through Plus. QBO Advanced is different. And while we don't have an exact webinar on that, just so you know, let me dive into there and show you the Manage User window in the QuickBooks Online Advanced level, which is above Plus. Still looks like QBO. But in that same user I have there, Abby, there's this other user type called Custom User, right? Because Essentials and Plus have standard user admin. Well, Essentials doesn't have reports only, but they both have time tracking. I don't know why I'm not seeing it here. It must be something I did, but the standard user we know, right? But there's a gap in the standard user because if they're a salesperson and they want to be able to make deposits from like undeposited funds in the register, you have to be an all user. But if you're an all user, while I can turn off payroll, I can still see P&L. So the advanced product offers this custom user where they can just be sales workflow, right? All sales transactions, product, services, customers, even some time entry, no reports, no expenses, but the ability to make bank deposits without being an all user. It's like the main gap that Advanced solves in user permissions of QBO. And once Advanced has more features, we'll probably do our own webinar on QBO Advanced, 45 minutes or something, just to make sure we're aligned. I do have a video on that site already on it, though, so you can watch that. However, so user roles. Now, usage limits. Let's drop down to my file again. And I'm going to go into the gear icon, Accountant Settings, Usage, right? So we have some usage limits now, okay? Simple Start, Essentials, and Plus. Well, only Plus has class location, but it's around users, chart of accounts, and class location. So you can have 40 total of class and location for Plus, right? Or else you got to go to Advanced. Now, if you have 44, I don't have to go to Advanced, but if I have to add more, I do. But I could just kind of stay where I'm at. Chart of accounts is 250. If I need more than that, I got to go to Advanced, or I could just never add another account again and stay at 258. That's fine. And then, of course, same with their users, right? Plus is up to 5. 6 to 25 would be Advanced. You can also see the usage limits in QBOA. This is the only time we're going back to QBOA today, and then we'll dive back in and look at the chart of accounts, bank feeds, and some common mistakes. We're almost done. We got like 10 minutes left. Under the gear icon, usage details. Now this should tell you, what clients are over the usage limits. So you can see that under the gear icon, or when you're actually in the client file itself. Just know that even though I'm over the limit, I never have to go up to Advanced if I don't want to, so long as I don't add any new users, accounts, or classes, okay? Or if I need to add like a critical account, I have to delete 9 of them. Remember, I was at 258, so I need to get to 249 to add the 250th. So there's that too, and there's a bunch of different knowledge base articles on that. And chart of accounts. Something to consider as a consultant or an accountant working with clients. The detail type. I'm going to click edit. You're like, what is that? I mean, I'm sure you've seen it and you wondered about it. It's an asterisk. You have to choose it, right? You don't even need to choose the type. You got to have the detail. Well, I guess we just assume it. Because the design was, back in 2000, because QBO launched in December 2001. Some of you might not even know that. And it just kind of sat in its status with some enhancements until like 2012 when we really started investing into it, right? So we weren't thinking about accountants working with small businesses back then. I think the Pro Advisor program was only like 3 or 4 years old at that time, right? Very small, right? That started in 97. Anyway, the detail type, Woody's not going to know what type of expense it is, so let's guide him through it, right? So the detail type only matters though when you're merging accounts or when you're importing from Excel. You've got to have a detail type. Outside of that, it does not matter. You can turn it off from reports, and you can even uncheck it as in the chart of accounts if you don't want to see it. But that's where it's there. It's important. So I have 2 travel accounts. One's like a sub. Why do I have both? I'd only need one, and one's not really, it's not a payroll expense. What I would do is I would edit this because I want to merge them, because I have transactions. By the way, running a report runs a quote-unquote quick report on the account. You can do that too. I did a check today for like $100 or something, but I want to merge the 2, right? First, though, in order to merge them, I have to change it to the, excuse me, the same detail type, or I can't merge it. And then I'm just going to, well, let me cancel out for a sec. What is it called? I just called it travel. Okay. You go to the one you want to merge it into. I'm sorry, the one you want to do to merge. Make sure it's the same detail type. What do you do in desktop to merge? You just make sure it's exactly the same number, same everything, right? Whoops. Save and close. Changing, and it'll tell you this. Are you sure you want to do this? Yes. And then it says name's already being used. You want to merge it to? Yes. Now I have just the one, and the transaction I did today is going to be rolled up into this account, you know. So you can merge, but it's just really important that you choose the right detail type. Okay. Other thing to consider, that's really it for chart of accounts. Reconcile. Yes, there is a discrepancy report. It's right here when there's an issue. Your account isn't ready to reconcile yet. You click on we can help you fix it. This is the reconcile discrepancy report. And you can make inline edits to bring it back. Or this shouldn't already be an R, it should be nothing, or a C, the cleared column, if you will. A way to make inline edits, and this is your rec discrepancy report. Now, when you go to history by account, some people will ask this, you know, where do you go to undo? Because I have this adjustment that was an auto, right? We don't want that. So you go to undo here. Only you all, meaning people coming in from QBOA, can do that. Okay, the summary we took out and put back. Some people use this from an audit standpoint. What account was reconciled, when. Again, you're doing more reconciles than me. If my last one was December 31, maybe do one for January. There's just some better filtering now with the reconciliation, right? There's payments or deposits or all, and it's going to filter to, you know, the statement ending date by default, but you can filter for some other stuff, different cleared status, dates, payee, memo, reference number. And a lot of these columns are click sortable. Date column, obviously, type, reference number, account isn't, payee is, right, to help you find stuff. But outside of that, I mean, you guys will be able to teach me many things about just reconciling in general. Remember the little gear icon. Make sure you remember that on lists and reports and any tool like the reconcile tool. You might not need to see everything here, so uncheck it. And finally, before we talk about opening balance equity, as we're getting to the end here, bank feeds. In that recording session, or go to Valerie's banking and reconcile longer session, it's like an hour long, for more. I just wanted to make sure that when you are using rules to auto-categorize the appropriate account, class, location, that kind of stuff. There is something in a rule, and a rule is just when a transaction meets any or all the criteria, right? When it comes in the feed, QBO is going to do this. There's a checkbox, automatically add to my books. It's not default checked for obvious reasons, because you want to review stuff before you add things from the For Review tab of the banking card into the register. And bank feeds offers batch undo, batch modify, batch delete, batch accepting into the register. So really the batch functionality in QBO is either recurring transactions or in the bank feed. The automatically add to my books, that literally once the rule's applied, it puts it in the register for you. You might have some transactions in the workflow where they don't really need to be reviewed. So they come in the feed, and they'll just go right into the register once the rule's applied. Anyway, to me, that's automation of data entry. Between that and recurring transactions, that's automation of data entry, right? So bank feed's very important. Go to that training, please, on that, or watch the recording from qbobestpractices.com. And finally, let's just talk about OBE. Priority no, but when your client might be adding a new account, and it's a bank account, just or a new customer or a new vendor or an inventory part and they want to put an initial quantity upon setup of the inventory part in QBO, that is all going to hit opening balance equity. So steer them away from that. For bank accounts, use a journal entry for the balance, right? Don't put anything in the balance field, I'm saying, when you're setting up records. We always offset it to opening balance equity. You don't want anything in OBE.